Welcome to Home Alone True Horror Stories, a chilling collection of real-life encounters that will make you question the safety of your own home. These are the terrifying tales of those who faced the unimaginable while alone in the place they should have felt safest. Listener beware. These true horror stories will haunt you long after the lights go out. If you think you're safe at home, think again. Sometimes the real terror begins when you're home alone. Now settle in, but remember, you're never truly alone. Let's begin. I had always been scared of the basement in my childhood home. It was a large, musty room with an old boiler that groaned like an old man. One evening, my parents went out for dinner, leaving me, a 15-year-old, home alone for the first time. As the night wore on, I began to hear strange noises coming from the basement. At first, it was a faint whispering, almost like the house was trying to speak to me. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the old pipes or my imagination. But then the whispers grew louder and more distinct. It sounded like a conversation between two people, though I couldn't make out the words. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly descended the creaky wooden stairs. The whispering stopped as soon as I reached the bottom. I swept the flashlight across the room, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just as I was about to turn around and go back upstairs, I heard a chilling voice right behind me whisper, "Don't turn around!" Frozen with fear, I felt a cold breath on my neck. Gathering all my courage, I spun around, but there was no one there. I bolted back upstairs and locked the basement door. To this day, I still don't know what or who was down there, but I've never felt safe in that house again. It was a warm summer night, and I was home alone. My parents were away on a business trip, and I was enjoying the freedom of having the house to myself. As the evening turned into night, I settled into my room to watch a movie. Halfway through, I heard a faint knocking sound coming from somewhere in the house. I paused the movie and listened intently. The knocking continued, soft and rhythmic. I checked all the doors and windows, but everything was locked and secure. The sound seemed to be coming from my parents' bedroom. I cautiously walked towards their room, the knocking growing louder with each step. When I reached their door, I found it was locked from the inside. This was strange because my parents never locked their door. I called out, but there was no response. The knocking continued, now more frantic and insistent. My heart pounded in my chest as I debated what to do. I decided to call my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who had a spare key to our house. He arrived quickly and we both stood outside my parents' bedroom door, listening to the unnerving sound. With a trembling hand, he unlocked the door and slowly pushed it open. The room was empty, but the window was wide open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. The knocking had stopped. We searched the room but found nothing out of place. Mr. Thompson assured me it was just the wind, but I knew better. The knocking sound was too deliberate, too eerie to be the wind. I slept in the living room that night, and my parents never locked their bedroom door again. I was 16 and home alone for the weekend while my parents went on a trip. It was the first time I had the house to myself for more than a few hours, and I was looking forward to some peace and quiet. That first night, as I was lying in bed, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but the footsteps were too distinct and deliberate. They moved slowly, as if someone was creeping down the hall, trying not to be heard. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could see the light from the hallway spilling into my room. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, and listened intently. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps continued, moving away from my room and down the stairs. I gathered my courage and tiptoed to the door, peeking out into the hallway. It was empty. I slowly made my way downstairs, the footsteps now silent. I checked all the doors and windows, but but everything was locked and secure. The house was empty, or so it seemed. I decided to stay up for the rest of the night, too scared to sleep. The footsteps didn't return, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next morning, I called my parents and told them about the footsteps. They dismissed it as my imagination, but I knew what I heard. For the rest of the weekend, I kept every light on and didn't sleep a wink. Growing up in a rural area, I was used to the quiet and isolation. My house was surrounded by fields and woods, with the nearest neighbor a mile away. One night when I was home alone, I was watching TV in the living room. It was a particularly dark and stormy night, with rain pounding against the windows. As I was engrossed in my show, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, and I saw a face pressed against the window. It was only for a split second, but the image was burned into my mind. A pale, gaunt face with hollow eyes, staring intently at me. I jumped up and ran to the window, but the face was gone. The rain was coming down hard, and visibility was low. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I closed all the curtains and double-checked the locks on the doors. I sat back down, trying to focus on the TV, but every sound made me jump. Another flash of lightning, and I saw the face again, this time in the kitchen window. Panic set in. I grabbed the phone and called the police, explaining what I had seen. They arrived quickly but found no signs of anyone outside. They assured me it was probably just a trick of the light and the storm playing tricks on my mind. But I knew what I saw. For the rest of the night, I stayed in the living room with the curtains drawn and all the lights on, too scared to move. I never saw the face again, but every time there was a storm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Our house had an old attic that was rarely used. It was filled with dusty boxes and forgotten memories. One summer, when I was home alone, I heard strange noises coming from the attic. At first, it was just faint creaking and thumping, but it soon escalated to louder bangs and crashes. I tried to ignore the noises, attributing them to the house settling, or maybe a raccoon that had found its way inside. But the sounds grew too persistent to dismiss. They seemed to occur at the same time every night, around midnight, as if on a schedule. One night, after a particularly loud crash, I decided I had to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, I nervously made my way to the attic door. The old wooden stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the top, I shone the flashlight around, illuminating the dusty boxes and old furniture. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew was overpowering. As I scanned the room, I saw nothing unusual at first. But then, in the far corner, I noticed something strange. An old trunk that had been shut tight for years was now wide open. The contents, old clothes, photo albums, and toys, were strewn about as if someone had been rifling through them. I walked over to the trunk, my bat at the ready, and peered inside. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze pass over me, and the attic door slammed shut. I spun around, my flashlight flickering. I felt a presence behind me, and a cold, ghostly hand touched my shoulder. I screamed and swung the bat, but hit nothing but air. In a panic, I ran to the attic door, struggling to open it. Finally, it gave way, and I stumbled down the stairs, not stopping until I was safely in the brightly lit kitchen. I called my parents, who returned home early the next morning. We never figured out what caused the disturbances in the attic. My parents insisted it was just my imagination, but I knew better. From that night on, I avoided the attic, never daring to venture up there alone again. It was the summer before I started college, and I was home alone for the weekend. My parents were away visiting relatives, and I was looking forward to a quiet weekend by myself. However, my peaceful plans were soon disrupted by strange occurrences in the house. It started with small things, objects moving on their own, lights flickering, and doors creaking open. I tried to brush it off, but the disturbances became more frequent and intense. One night, as I was watching TV in the living room, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. I rushed to the kitchen and found the contents of the pantry scattered all over the floor. Cans, boxes, and jars lay in disarray. As I stood there in shock, the lights began to flicker violently, and the temperature dropped significantly. Suddenly, the cupboard doors slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the kitchen table moved several inches on its own. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread and knew I wasn't alone. I ran to my room, locking the door behind me. As I sat on my bed, trying to calm myself, the poltergeist activity continued. My books flew off the shelves, and my dresser drawers opened and closed repeatedly. The room filled with an eerie, otherworldly energy. In a desperate attempt to stop the chaos, I shouted, "Leave me alone!" To my surprise, the disturbances stopped abruptly. The room fell silent, and the oppressive feeling lifted. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, clutching my phone and ready to call for help at any moment. The next morning, I called a friend, and they came over to keep me company. We didn't experience any more disturbances, but the memory of that night still haunts me. I never found out what caused the poltergeist activity, but I knew I had encountered something beyond my understanding. The last story I have to tell took place when I was in my early 20s. I had moved into my own apartment, enjoying the independence and freedom. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home, made dinner, and settled in for a relaxing night. As I was getting ready for bed, I felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching me. I glanced around the room, but everything seemed normal. I shrugged it off and climbed into bed, hoping to get a good night's sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly, feeling an intense pressure on my chest. I couldn't move or speak, and my heart raced with fear. In the corner of my room, I saw a dark figure, taller than any human, standing completely still. It had no discernible features, just a shadowy humanoid shape. The figure slowly moved towards me, and the pressure on my chest increased. I felt a wave of terror wash over me as it reached the side of my bed. Suddenly, it vanished, and the pressure lifted. I sat up, gasping for air, my body trembling with fear. For the next few nights, the Shadow Man returned, always at the same time, always bringing the same suffocating fear. Desperate for help, I contacted a paranormal investigator. They came to my apartment, performed a cleansing ritual, and advised me to keep a journal of any further occurrences. After the cleansing, the Shadow Man visits became less frequent, but I could still feel his presence lingering. I moved out of that apartment a few months later, hoping to leave the terror behind. However, I occasionally wake up in the middle of the night, half expecting to see that shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed.